Happy Friday, everybody. So I just finished watching Christmas, Bloody Christmas, the latest Shudder original, and also the latest offering from director Joe Begos. Joe Begos, you might remember, was also the director of Almost Human, The Mind's Eye, Bliss, VFW, and now this. I think maybe in that order, but don't quote me on that. And if you've seen any of those movies, you know what Joe Begos is all about. His movies tend to be very 80s centric, a lot of early Carpenter worship in his aesthetic, neon lights galore, synth soundtracks, scuzzy atmosphere populated with scuzzy characters. Although Begos does generally tend to treat his characters, however scuzzy, with a little more affection than someone like, say, Rob Zombie. Overall, I enjoy Joe Begos as a director a lot. His films are not necessarily going to change your life. They're nothing that you would ever call highbrow. In fact, if anything, they are the very antithesis of elevated horror. But they're always well made, entertaining, and consistently of solid quality. Christmas Bloody Christmas is certainly not inventing any new wheels. It doesn't represent any sort of major step forward for Joe Begos as a director, but it's very much what you would expect a Joe Begos Christmas slasher movie to be. And based on that statement, I think you already know whether it's for you or not. It's not as off the wall as Bliss, nor is it quite as much fun as VFW, but it's still a fun ride all the way through. The movie opens up with a record store owner named Tori who is getting ready to shut down shop on Christmas Eve and is preparing to go off and have a very anti-Christmas evening with one of her employees at the record store, as well as a couple of friends for some drinks and cocaine and Tinder sex, you know, the usual Christmas Eve stuff. And on a side note, as far as the sex goes, I can't help but notice that this is at least the second Joe Begos movie I have seen that features a sequence where one character is clearly eating. Based on where his mouth is positioned, it's very clear that this is he's eating and not. Whether this is Begos telling us more about himself than we would maybe like to know, I'll leave for you to conclude, but yeah, there you go. While all the low-key partying hijinks are taking place, turns out that in the toy store that Tori's friends work at, there is an animatronic Santa toy that, as a newscast lets us know, has been starting to show instances of malfunctioning and reverting back to its original programming as a government military weapon. And we get to watch as this particular malfunctioning Santa robot goes on a killing spree and targets Tori and her friends, splitting them in half, twisting their necks around, and tossing them to and fro in all sorts of gleefully sadistic and over-the-top gory ways. And you can tell that Joe Begos understands, as well as anyone does at this point, that The Terminator was essentially a slasher film with a robot in place of a Jason or Michael type figure. And he might even understand that a little too well for his own good, because between a mid-film assault on a police station to the climax of the film where his skin has been peeled back to reveal his exoskeleton and he just never seems to die and he's crawling towards Tori with his robotic hands outstretched, it really does feel like we are having a very Terminator Christmas here. Which isn't necessarily as much of a criticism as it might sound, because it's all done with enough style and fun that it's always entertaining. Honestly, the only real criticism that I have in terms of that aspect of the movie is that it does, after a certain point, start to overplay the whole dynamic of the killer, or in this case, the robot, never really being dead. Like, there must have been at least 4 or 5 false endings and revivals in the last 10 minutes of the movie. All done very well, mind you. It's not like it was bad or it was boring or even tedious, even though it maybe should have been. It was along the lines of how I felt by the end of John Wick 3, where everything just kept being thrown at me so tirelessly that I just felt a little bit numb to it ultimately. But because the lead actress plays Tori as well as she does and manages to find ways to make her more likable and sympathetic than she should be on paper, I was always rooting for her even when it felt like the movie should have been over 2 or 3 deaths ago. And it's a testament to how good her performance is, as well as the aforementioned affection that Joe Begos has for her and the other characters in the movie, that those early passages where you're just getting to watch the characters hanging out feel genuinely spontaneous and improvised, even though they're probably not. I might be skirting sacrilege here, but even compared to a movie like Death Proof, where in some cases I feel like the banter between the girls goes on a bit too long, I could listen to Tori and the supporting characters sit around and crack wise and drink and debate each other back and forth about music and movies forever. Like I've said before, I think in one of my reviews, watching people just hang out and just kind of be is not going to be boring if you're actually convinced that these are real people just having a conversation, and this always feels real. The early stretch of the film is always interesting and engaging and convincing that way. And while I wouldn't count on a guy like Joe Begos leaving his genre nest anytime soon, Observations like that make me curious as to what he could achieve if he ever tried to do a more somber or realistic drama, just studying a character. I think that he's got more depth there than people will give him credit for at this point. For better or worse, we are going to have to wait a little bit longer to see if he's got anything like that up his sleeve. For now, he's giving us another offering that is par for the course, so if you're in the mood for a no-frills, fun Joe Begos Christmas slasher movie, you're going to get that here guaranteed. Have some friends over, get some snacks, whack back some Jaeger, huff on a joint, and you'll be in good hands with this one. Well, that's all I got for now, guys. I hope you're all having an awesome Friday. More content coming your way very soon, and I will catch you all again before the end of the weekend.